Good afternoon again. Economics Lecture 2. So now you should have your textbook in front of you to Chapter 10. Chapter 10 is Monopolistic Competition and Oligopoly. Oligopoly. Now you remember we had on the board a couple of weeks ago a long spectrum. And at one end was perfect competition. That's where you had a very large number of competitors in the market, and they sold an identical product. Now, I gave as an example wheat farmers. 1,000 wheat farmers are going to grow precisely the same kind of wheat. So there are 1,000 competitors, one single, absolutely identical product. One grain of wheat is just like every other grain of wheat. So that is perfectly competitive market. And a perfectly competitive market is going to have a demand curve which is flat. There is one price because there's 1,000 competitors. If you want to sell any kind of grain at all, you got to sell at the market price of grain. You don't have the option to raise your price. There won't be anybody who will want to buy it because everybody else is selling at one set price, the market price for grain. And if you lower your price, you're just going to lose money because everybody else is going to be able to sell at the market price because there are thousands of them. So it's the demand curve on a perfectly competitive market is flat as a pancake in the horizontal. At the set price, if you want to sell wheat, that's what you sell it for. And as much as you want to sell, you can sell at that price, but nowhere else, right? So perfectly competitive was one end. On the other end of the spectrum was monopoly. That's where you have one firm that produces a totally unique product. There's nothing like it anywhere. No similar products of any kind. There's only the one firm. That's monopoly. Well, monopolistic competition and oligopoly are in the middle. Monopolistic competition is not perfect competition. That is where a monopolistic competition is where you've got a smaller number of firms, but they don't sell an identical product. They sell similar products. So they compete for customers in the fact that their products are not quite similar. They're quite identical. They're similar, but they're not identical. So a consumer might go for one or the other. A grain farmer, it's all grain. I don't care who I buy it from. But if it's Dr. Pepper, Coke, Pepsi, I care, So you'd have to, I'm a Dr. Pepper drinker, so you'd have to lower the price on Coke a lot for me to swap out Dr. Pepper for Coke. But I might do it if it was a lot cheaper, right? So that is what's called monopolistic competition. It's real competition because there are many competitors, but there's a monopolistic, not real monopoly, but it's like a monopoly for their differentiated product. Dr. Pepper is not Coke, right? It's different. So Dr. Pepper Company has a monopoly on Dr. Pepper. Coke has a monopoly on Coke. They're similar, but not identical. So that's monopolistic competition. They are in competition. A great example would be gasoline. Some of you are starting to drive now. So you realize that there might be 3 gas stations on opposite corners. You think, well, is Chevron's gas really that much different than Mobil's or whatever that, place there on the corner is? It's not got the big brand name sign. Is the gasoline exactly the same, or is it maybe a little different? Do I care? So that would be monopolistic competition between the retailers of gasoline. Got it? Oligopoly is where you have only a very small number of competitors, and they sell similar or identical products, but a very small number. What would be an example? Maybe smartphones. You got Apple, you got Samsung, you got the various Google Android phones, but I bet there aren't half a dozen real competitive cell phone manufacturers in the world. So that would be oligopoly. Usually when you're talking about 5 or fewer, it's oligopoly. Remember, oligos, few. So a few people with a similar or identical product on the market. So talking about monopolistic competition, I mentioned a key phrase, differentiated product. You've got to have a product that's a little different to be a monopolistic competitor. You have to have something that's uniquely yours. On the other hand, you're not a real monopoly because there are similar things out there. So let's say there were 10 smartphone manufacturers. I don't know if there are. If there were, it would be monopolistic competition because each smartphone is different. I know that an iPhone and an Android and a Samsung phone, or they use something else, I think they do, are different phones. They do some of the similar things, but not identically similar things. So that would be a differentiated product there. Physical aspects of the product can be different. Appearance aspects can be different. It talks about how intangible, tangere is Latin for to touch. So intangible means things you can't touch. You can't put your hands right on it and say what makes something different, but there's an intangible quality, like a reputation. I mean, Apple has a reputation for making good, solid products that any idiot like me can use. They're intuitively obvious to the non-tech savvy. So I'm tempted to go buy an Apple product rather than something else, which might in other ways be better, just because I have that reputation in my head. Where did I get that idea from? Maybe from advertising, maybe from hearing other people talk about it. But those are the kind of intangibles that can differentiate your product. So let's say I've got a differentiated product. I've got like 8 competitors that make something similar. How am I going to think about demand for my product? So if a perfect competitive demand curve is flat as a pancake this way, if I'm going to sell, I've got to sell at the market price that the other 20,000 sellers are selling grain at. Monopoly is almost straight down in the curve like that. That's the demand curve of a monopoly. If I set the price high as a monopolist, I'm the only game in town. If they want my product, they'll pay for it. But if I set the price real high, demand is going to be low, right? Because if it's crazy high, nobody's going to want it. If I set the price low, I'm the only game in town, but people are probably going to stock up. They're going to buy a ton. So the demand curve for a monopolist is quite steep down like that. As you might imagine, a monopolistic competitor's demand curve is somewhere in between. It tends to shallow out like that. So that at a set price, you are going to get more demand as the price goes down. But because there are other competitors out there, you won't be the only one meeting that demand at the lower price. So you don't get the steep, crazy steep demand curve like a monopolist would. It's more shallowed out down like that, down from monopolistic competition. Now, how does a monopolistic competitor choose its price? Here, I want you to turn to page 230. This is very useful. Page 230, you'll see the Work It Out section, 230, Work It Out. And they talk about there how a monopolistic competitor determines how much to produce and at what price. This is where the rubber hits the road, right? So they talk about this, how does a monopolistic competitor determine its profit maximizing level of output? So that's your first thing there. You want to figure out what maximum output of my pizzas. They got the pizza company back again. What is the maximum number of pizzas I can get to maximize my profit? And they point out there, if the firm is producing at a quantity of output where marginal revenue exceeds marginal cost, then the firm should keep expanding production. So if I'm making more for each pizza I sell by a good amount, I want to keep expanding my production. I want to bring in more money by selling more pizzas. But at a certain point, each pizza's additional revenues I get from it is going to start dropping. If I move from making 5 pizzas an hour to 10, I probably got a pretty good marginal revenue increase on each pizza. But if I move from making 150 to 155 pizzas, my guess is the marginal revenue increase on that 5 extra pizzas is not going to be that much. And that's the way it is for everything. At a certain point, the marginal increase in how much you're getting coming in for each new pizza you're making is not going to be as much. And then eventually it's going to start dropping. You're going to be just putting too much work into making the extra pizzas. You won't be able to sell them at a price that'll make you a profit. So that's what I was pointing. If a firm is producing at a quantity where marginal costs exceeds marginal revenue, then the marginal unit is costing more than the revenue it brings in. So that's when you stop making the darn pizzas, right? It's costing me money. I'm losing money making more pizzas than this. So you're going to hit that sweet spot, the profit maximizing level of production, where you've reached that sweet spot between marginal revenues and marginal production, okay? So that tells you how much. You got to do that kind of calculation to determine what's the maximum output on pizzas or whatever to make a profit. Step 2, you got to figure out what price to charge. And that goes like everything else you've already talked about there. You've got to figure out what your customer base will accept as a price. And, you might have some experience in other markets and the like, but partly it's guesswork for a while. And you want to set a price where your production maximizing level will all sell, right? You don't want, Lord knows, you might think, oh, I've got a production maximizing amount of pizzas, but if I'm only selling 2/3 of them, then it's a disaster. I got to lower my price and sell all those pizzas. On the other hand, if you set the price too low, you're going to run out of pizzas and you're sending customers away unsatisfied because you won't have them. You stop making them and your profit maximizing drop to its minimum. So trial and error, some experience. You got to figure out how many to produce. How many to produce already, at what price you're going to sell your production. Once the firm has chosen a price and quantity, it's in a position to calculate total revenue, total cost, and profit. So you can see they show you how, using the chart up on the top of that page, how to do that. Now, the next section on page 231 has monopolistic competitors and entry, meaning I'm set up my business. Let's say I'm a gas station. I'm selling Exxon on one corner of a busy intersection. And I'm doing great. I'm the only gas station there. And people in that neighborhood want gas. They're coming to Foster for the gas. It's all good. But if I got long lines of people buying my gas, and I'm getting a good price for it, you can bet somebody's going to think, hey, why don't we put another gas station on the other corner? That guy's doing pretty good. We could too. And that's the thing. It's monopolistic competition. My Exxon gas is not the only game in town, right? Mobil, Chevron, all the other places, all the other gas companies, they're selling a very similar product. So they might set up on another corner. And another one might even come. I'm sure you know of intersections or 3 or even 4 gas stations on each intersection corner. So that's entry into your market. What's going to happen to the demand for my gasoline, the original gas seller on the corner, when I get competitors? Obviously, the demand for my product is going to shift. It's going to shift to the right? You're going to have less demand for my product at the price I was charging because there are competitors out there. They're going to lower the price. So I've got to lower the price. If I want to keep my demand, my level of demand, my share of the market, I'm going to have to lower my price. So the demand curve is going to shift to the left, and prices are going to come down for each quantity I want to sell, right? So that's life for a monopolistic competitor. You're going to have competition. They're going to come after you. If you're making money, they're going to come. You can't stop them because their product is their product and it's differentiated from yours. You don't have any legal barriers to keep them out. So there's going to be real competition and you could lose money. But that means it's an efficient market, right? That means that consumers are getting a benefit. I don't think you see it so much anymore, every once in a while. But when I was a kid, I remember there were gas wars, we called them, where one company on one corner would lower the price 2 or 3 cents, and the next company would lower theirs 4 cents. And then the corner on the other third corner lower the whole price 8 cents. And they keep lowering it a few pennies every 3 or 4 days, and the price might come down quite a bit until somebody finally knuckles under and says, no, I can't lower it anymore. I won't make any money. So that's monopolistic competition. It's a very inefficient market, though. It means that consumers get a good price, and the price moves pretty quick when there's competition. All right. Couple of benefits from monopolistic competition. Well, we get differentiated products, which means we get variety. Now, it says in your book that there are 1,800 different kinds of golf balls made by something like 24 golf ball manufacturers in the United States. I'm not a golfer. I don't think I would care what kind of ball I had very much. But there are clearly people who do. There are people out there who've been convinced, I must have this particular golf ball out of the 1,800 varieties available. If I was a golfer, maybe I'd think that was the greatest thing in the world. But as any consumer, you want monopolistic competition. You want lots of competitors out there making similar products for you to choose from. Because it's going to, A, increase the variety of goods out there in the market. Going to make them want to produce a better quality product because, if the Dr. Pepper goes off a little bit, I might switch to Coke. So I'm going to keep quality standards higher that way. I'm going to get a variety to choose from. Variety's the spice of life, right? Monopolistic competition gives us that. Perfect competition doesn't. Remember, it's just one product. There's no differentiation. Monopoly doesn't do that, but monopolistic competition does. So that's really, as a consumer, kind of your ideal. Now, I've got to differentiate my product if I'm a monopolistic competitor. How do I do that? Well, commercial advertising is probably the number one way to do that. What really matters is convincing the consumer your product is different. As long as it doesn't violate patent rules or something, the government doesn't care. But you got to convince the consumers out there, I want Foster's product instead of Jones's product. And advertising is the way to do that. Show them how my product is different, my product is superior, my price for the product is better. But differentiate your product with advertising. So that's the number one way that's done. We'll take up oligopoly briefly next time. Then I think we'll move on to the regulation of monopoly in the United States under law. Thank you.